The crystalline spires of the Galactic Tribunal pierced the artificial atmosphere of Station Nexus, like accusations thrust toward the stars, inside the Grand Chamber, where justice was supposed to flow as pure as starlight. Darkness gathered around Dr. Mira Ashworth like a suffocating shroud. The defendant will rise. Mira stood, her legs trembling beneath the weight of the gravity shackles. Around her, the amphitheater stretched in perfect circles. Tier upon tier of alien delegates from 1,000 worlds, their eyes some compound, others glowing. Many utterly inhuman, fixed upon her with the cold hunger of predators sensing wounded prey. At the highest tier, Magistrate Nyx Valdres presided with the terrible beauty of her species. The Zephyrian's skin shifted between deep purples and midnight blues, while silver patterns flowed across her features like living circuitry. Her forearms moved in ritualistic gestures as she spoke, each word carrying the weight of cosmic authority. Mira, Ashworth of Earth Colony Verdania. Nyx's voice resonated through the chamber with harmonic overtones that made the air itself shiver. You stand accused of bioterrorism against the civilian populations of 7 worlds, resulting in the deaths of over 2 million sentient beings. In the gallery reserved for family, 8-year-old Cale Ashworth pressed his small face against the observation barrier. His mother had always told him that plants were meant to heal, to bring life where there was none. The Ashworth Botanical Institute had terraformed barren moons, created oxygen gardens for dying worlds, and developed crops that could grow in the harshest environments. How could creating life be a crime, Mama? He whispered, fogging the transparent aluminum with his breath. Captain Orion Blake, the gruff transport pilot who had brought them to the station, placed a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. Easy there, little star, Orion murmured. His weathered face creased with worry. Your mama's strong. She'll get through this. But even as he spoke the words, Orion felt the cosmic deck stacked against them. The tribunal had already decided this was theater, not justice. Below, Mira raised her chin defiantly. I created those plants to heal damaged ecosystems, not to kill. The biotoxin modifications were made by terrorists who stole my research. I had nothing to do with silence. Nyx's lower arms gestured sharply, and Mira's words died in her throat as neural inhibitors activated in her collar. The evidence is overwhelming. Biosignatures from the weaponized flora match your genetic markers perfectly. The terrorist organization, calling itself the Green Void, obtained these weapons through your direct cooperation. That's impossible, Mira managed to gasp as the inhibitors briefly released. My research was classified, protected by quantum encryption that only you possessed the key to unlock. Another magistrate interjected. This one resembled a crystalline spider, its faceted voice ringing like struck glass. How convenient that you claim ignorance of your own guilt. Cale watched his mother's face crumble. He had seen that expression before when his father died in the mining accident, when the creditors came to take their home, when she thought he was asleep and cried quietly in her laboratory. It was the look of someone fighting a battle they knew they couldn't win. The defendant's guilt is established beyond question, Nyx continued, her silver patterns now pulsing with red undertones. The only matter remaining is sentencing. Given the magnitude of destruction caused by your biological weapons, this tribunal finds death to be the appropriate consequence. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices. Some called for immediate execution, others demanded public torture. Through it all, Cale could only hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears as the word death echoed endlessly. Through his mind, however, Nyx raised her primary arms, and silence fell like a blade in recognition of the defendant's previous contributions to terraforming efforts. We offer a choice: death by neural disintegration or life imprisonment on Tartarus 7. Tartarus 7. Even an 8-year-old had heard whispers of the prison moon orbiting the dead star Nemesis. No one returned from Tartarus 7. The gravitational anomalies alone killed most prisoners within the first year, and those who survived faced the mining gangs, toxic storms, and creatures that defied classification. It wasn't mercy, it was prolonged execution. Mira closed her eyes, and when she opened them, her gaze found Cale in the gallery. For a moment, time suspended itself between them. Mother and son, separated by transparent barriers and the weight of impossible choices. "I choose exile," she whispered, her words amplified through the chamber's acoustics. "I choose to live. So be it." Nix's voice carried a note of satisfaction. That made Kel's skin crawl. "Mira Ashworth, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment on Tartarus 7. Your citizenship is revoked. Your assets forfeit to the tribunal for victim compensation. You have 1 hour to say goodbye to family before transport." The gravity shackles released with a sharp click, and Mira stumbled forward. Security drones immediately flanked her, their weapons powered but not aimed, not yet. On the family gallery, Kale broke free from Orion's grip and pressed both hands against the barrier. "Mama, Mama, don't leave me." Mira looked up at him, tears streaming down her face as she mounted words he couldn't hear over the chamber's din. "I love you. Be strong. Find the truth." Then the security escorts surrounded her completely, and she vanished from view. The next hour passed in a blur of corridors and temporary holding rooms. Kale sat on Mira's lap while she stroked his hair and whispered promises she couldn't keep. "You're going to live with Captain Blake now," she said softly. "He's a good man, and he'll take care of you." "I want to go with you," Kale sobbed into her shoulder. "Please, Mama, I'll be good. I won't cause trouble. Oh, my little star." Mira tilted his chin up so she could look into his eyes that were the same shade of green as her own. "You could never cause trouble. You're the most precious thing in all the galaxy." She pressed something into his palm, a small date, a crystal shaped like a flower, warm to the touch. "This contains everything I know about my research. When you're older, when you understand, use it to find the truth. Promise me." Kel's fingers closed around the crystal. "I promise, Mama." "And remember," she whispered as the security drones returned, "love is the strongest force in the universe, stronger than gravity, stronger than hate, stronger than injustice. Find someone to love and let them love you back. It will make you invincible." The drones escorted her away for the final time. Kale watched through another observation window as his mother boarded the prison transport, a black ship that seemed to devour light rather than reflect it. The vessel's engines ignited with hellish fire, and then it was gone, carrying Mira Ashworth toward the edge of known space. 17 years later, Kale would finally understand what his mother meant about love making him invincible. But first, he had to learn how to survive in a galaxy that had stolen everything from him. Before he was old enough to fight back, standing beside him, Captain Orion Blake made a silent vow of his own. He would raise this boy, protect him, and when the time came, help him discover the truth that had cost his mother everything. In the depths of space, the transport ship Judgment headed toward Tartarus 7, carrying the most innocent prisoner in galactic history toward a fate worse than death. But Mira Ashworth was far from broken. In the darkness of her cell, she began to plan. Justice had failed her, but perhaps her son would succeed where the galaxy's greatest institutions had not. The stars themselves seemed to whisper, "The story is far from over." 17 years had transformed the frightened boy into a man who navigated the stars with the precision of someone who had learned early that the universe offered no guarantees. Kale Ashworth stood in the cargo bay of his modified freighter, Starbound Echo, watching asteroid miners load crystalline ore with mechanical efficiency. At 25, he had his mother's green eyes and gentle hands, but the galaxy had carved harder lines around them, a map of losses written in starlight and shadow. "That's the last of it, pilot," the dock foreman called out, his cybernetic implants glowing blue in the artificial twilight of asteroid station Omega 7. "Payment's been transferred to your account." Kale nodded, checking his wrist display. Another successful cargo run. Another step closer to accumulating enough credits for the kind of ship that could reach the outer rim where Tartarus 7 waited in its deadly orbit. Every job brought him closer to finding his mother if she was still alive. "Kale Ashworth?" He turned at the sound of his name, spoken in a voice that carried the warm accent of the core worlds. A young woman emerged from behind a stack of cargo containers, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, intelligent amber eyes studying him with obvious interest. She wore the coveralls of a station engineer, but something in her bearing suggested she was far more than she appeared. Depends who's asking. Kale replied cautiously. 17 years of freelance piloting had taught him that his name in the wrong mouth could mean trouble. Someone who heard you might be willing to take on a passenger with unconventional cargo. She stepped closer, and he caught the scent of ozone and recycled air that clung to those who worked deep in the station's mechanical heart. My name is Zara Novak. I need to reach the Helix Nebula, and I'm told you're one of the few pilots crazy enough to navigate those ion storms. The Helix Nebula's restricted space, Kale said, though something about her direct gaze made him want to hear more. Tribunal patrol ships shoot first and ask questions of the wreckage. Zara's lips curved in a smile that was equal parts invitation and challenge. Then it's a good thing I'm very good at making ships invisible to their sensors. Before Kale could respond, the station's emergency klaxons began wailing. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, he could see tribunal enforcement vessels dropping out of hyperspace. Sleek predators painted in the black and silver of galactic authority. Attention all vessels, a voice boomed over the station. "Com, this is Tribunal Enforcement Squadron 7. We are conducting a security sweep for rebel terrorists. Prepare for inspection." Zara's hand found Kel's arm, her touch electric even through his jacket sleeve. "I don't suppose you have somewhere private we could continue this conversation?" Something in her eyes, fear mixed with desperate hope, reminded him achingly of his mother's last look. Without another word, he led her deeper into his ship. The starbound Echo was modest by galactic standards, but Kale had spent years customizing every system. The main lounge featured salvaged furniture arranged around a holographic star chart that currently displayed their location in the asteroid belt. Zara's eyes immediately went to the technical specifications scrolling along one wall. "Impressive. Modifications," she murmured, running her fingers along a power coupling that shouldn't have been able to handle the energy load. It was clearly managing. "You've overcharged your hyperdrive by at least 30%, but somehow maintained system stability. How?" "Careful engineering and a lot of prayer," Kale replied, watching her examine his ship with the intensity of someone who truly understood what she was seeing. "You never told me what kind of cargo you need to transport." Zara turned to face him, fully and in the soft glow of the ship's lighting. He realized she was beautiful in the way that sharp tools were beautiful, elegant, purposeful, and potentially dangerous. "Information," she said simply, specifically. "Evidence that the Galactic Tribunal has been manufacturing the very crimes they claim to prosecute." Kel's blood went cold. "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime." Zara pulled a small data pad from her coveralls, its screen filled with scrolling text and technical diagrams. "For the past 3 years, I've been tracking irregularities in tribunal cases, bioweapons that couldn't have been created by the accused scientists, terrorist attacks that benefited corporations with tribunal connections, prisoners who disappear into the system and are never seen again." "Why are you telling me this?" Kale asked, though his heart was already racing with possibilities he didn't dare name. "Because I've heard you've been asking questions about someone sent to Tartarus the 7th. 17 years ago, a botanical researcher named Mira Ashworth." The name hit him like a plasma bolt to the chest. Kale sat down heavily on the nearest chair, the data crystal his mother had given him seeming to burn in the pocket, where he'd carried it every day since her trial. "You knew my mother?" "I know her case was one of the first instances of the pattern I've been tracking." Zara sat across from him, leaning forward with earnest intensity. The bioweapons attributed to her research showed modifications that required technology she never had access to. The terrorist group that supposedly recruited her didn't exist until after her arrest, and the quantum encryption on her data was broken using codes that only tribunal members possessed. She was innocent. The words came out as barely a whisper, carrying 17 years of hope and anguish. More than innocent, she was deliberately framed. Zara reached out and covered his hand with hers, the contact sending warmth racing up his arm. "Kale, I think your mother discovered something the tribunal couldn't allow to become public. Something worth destroying her life to keep secret, outside." The tribunal ships continued their search, their scanning beams sweeping across the asteroid field like hungry fingers. But inside the starbound Echo, to hearts beat in synchronization as understanding passed between them. "The cargo you need to transport," Kale said slowly. "It's evidence that could clear her name. Evidence that could bring down the entire corrupt system." Zara's amber eyes caught the starlight streaming through the viewport. "But I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands the Outer Rim routes. Someone with a ship fast enough to outrun pursuit. Someone with a personal stake in seeing justice done. And in return, we find out what really happened to your mother. We discover why she was worth framing. And maybe," she squeezed his hand gently, "maybe we find a way to bring her home." Kale looked into Zara's face and saw his own desperate hope reflected there. But more than that, he saw intelligence, courage, and a determination that matched his own. For the first time in 17 years, he didn't feel alone in his quest. "When do we leave?" he asked. Zara's smile was radiant. "As soon as the tribunal. Ships finish their sweep and jump to hyperspace. I have contacts in the Helix Nebula who've been waiting years for someone willing to risk carrying this information." As if summoned by her words, the enforcement vessels outside began powering up their hyperdrives. Their hunt apparently unsuccessful. Soon they would be gone, leaving only the vast darkness of space and infinite possibilities. "Zara," Kale said, softly, still holding her hand, "why does this matter so much to you? This fight against the tribunal?" Her expression grew distant, touched with old pain. "Because they took someone from me too, and because some injustices are too great to leave unanswered." In that moment, looking into her eyes, Kale felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood, the sense that he wasn't facing the universe alone. Whatever lay ahead in the Helix Nebula, whatever dangers awaited in their quest for truth, he would face them with this remarkable woman beside him. Love, his mother had told him, was the strongest force in the universe. As the last tribunal ship vanished into hyperspace, and Zara began plotting their course to the nebula, Kale began to understand what she had meant. The hunt for justice was about to become something infinitely more precious, the discovery of a heart that could match his own. The Helix Nebula stretched before them like a cosmic tapestry woven from dreams and danger. Swirling clouds of ionized gas painted the void in shades of amber and rose, while electric storms danced between the stars with deadly beauty. Kel's hands moved across the navigation controls with practiced precision, threading the starbound echo through corridors of space that would have torn lesser ships apart. "Adjust course by 2 degrees starboard," Zara called from the co-pilot's seat, her fingers flying over the sensor ray she'd been modifying for the past week. "There's a particle storm forming off our port bow." 3 weeks had passed since they'd left asteroid station Omega 7. 3 weeks of traveling together through the galaxy's most treacherous regions. In that time, Kale had learned that Zara possessed an engineer's mind that could solve problems he hadn't even known existed. A laugh that made his chest tighten with unnamed longing, and a way of looking at star charts that turned navigation into poetry. "You know," he said, making the course correction while stealing glances at her profile, "most people would be terrified flying through nebula storms. You look like you're enjoying yourself." Zara turned to him with that brilliant smile that had been appearing more frequently as the days passed. "Most people don't get to fly with a pilot who treats physics like a polite suggestion." "I've never felt safer." The words hung between them, carrying layers of meaning that neither quite dared to acknowledge directly. But in the soft glow of the cockpit lighting, with the cosmos spread out before them like a promise, Kale felt the walls he'd built around his heart beginning to crumble. "Contact ahead," Zara announced, her tone shifting to professional alertness. "It's the signal I've been waiting for." A ship materialized from the nebula's concealing embrace, sleek, unmarked, and clearly designed for stealth rather than comfort. As it approached, a face appeared on their communication screen, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, and the weathered features of someone who'd spent years in space's unforgiving embrace. "Zara Novak," the woman said without preamble. "You're later than expected. Traffic delays." Zara replied dryly, "Juno Reeves, meet Kale Ashworth. He's the pilot I told you about." Juno's sharp eyes studied Kale for a long moment. "Ashworth, that name sounds familiar." "My mother was Mira Ashworth," Kale said quietly, "sentenced to Tartarus 17 years ago." Juno's expression shifted, becoming something softer and more dangerous. Ah, then you have even more reason to see this through than I thought. She gestured behind her. Dock with my ship. What I have to show you requires privacy and encryption that can't be transmitted. An hour later, they sat in Juno's cramped but sophisticated command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts, legal documents, and surveillance footage that made Kel's blood run cold. I used to work for the tribunal, Juno. Began without preamble. Information analysis, pattern recognition, the boring technical work that keeps a galactic government functioning, until I noticed patterns that weren't supposed to exist. She activated a hologram showing a timeline stretching back 20 years. Botanical terrorism incidents, all blamed on researchers who had previously shown no political affiliations. Weapons grade, diseases attributed to medical scientists working on cures. Energy weapon attacks traced to physicists studying clean power generation. They're framing scientists, Zara said, leaning forward intently. But why? Because knowledge is power, and the tribunal wants to control both. Juno manipulated the display, highlighting connections between the cases. Every scientist they've eliminated was working on research that could threaten corporate profits or tribunal authority. Your mother, Kale, had developed botanical techniques that could terraform planets without expensive technology. That would have cost certain corporations trillions in lost revenue. Kel's hands clenched into fists, so they destroyed her life to protect their profit margins. Worse than that, Juno's voice grew grim. They've been using the framed scientists' research to create the very weapons they claim to be fighting against. Your mother's botanical modifications weren't stolen by terrorists. They were weaponized by tribunal scientists and then used to justify her imprisonment. The room fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Zara reached out and took Kel's hand, her touch anchoring him as rage threatened to overwhelm rational thought. There's more, Juno continued. I've been monitoring tribunal communications, and I have reason to believe your mother is still alive. Kel's heart stopped. What? Tartarus 7 isn't just a prison, it's a research facility. The tribunal has been using prisoners as test subjects for bioweapons development, and they keep the most valuable scientists alive to continue their work under duress. The hologram shifted to show surveillance footage from the prison, moon grainy, distant, but clear enough to show figures moving through what looked like a laboratory complex. I can't be certain, Juno said gently, but one of the figures matches your mother's height and build. The timestamp on this footage is only 3 months old. Kale couldn't speak. 17 years of believing his mother was probably dead, and now we have to get her out. He managed to whisper. First, we expose the conspiracy, Zara said firmly, her hand tightening on his. If we move against Tartarus 7 without proof of the tribunal's crimes, we'll just be labeled terrorists ourselves. Juno nodded approvingly. Smart woman. I have compiled evidence that will bring down the entire system, but it needs to be transmitted simultaneously to news networks across the galaxy. One broadcast won't be enough, they'll suppress it. We need coordinated revelation. What do you need from us? Zara asked. Access to the tribunal's central communication hub on Station Nexus. With the right modifications to their own systems, we can hijack their entire network and broadcast the truth to every world in the galaxy. Simultaneously, Kale felt Zara's excitement like electricity in the air. It's possible, she said, her engineer's mind already working on the problem. The security is formidable, but with the right approach, it's suicide. Kale interrupted. Nexus Station is the most heavily guarded installation in the galaxy. Not if we have inside help. Juno said quietly. There's someone in the tribunal hierarchy who's been feeding me information. Someone who wants to see justice done. She activated another display showing personnel files. Admiral Orion Blake, formerly Captain Blake of Transport Division 7. Kel's breath caught. Orion raised me after my mother's arrest. I haven't seen him in years. He was promoted to the tribunal's inner circle. He's been working from within to gather evidence, Juno explained. But he needs someone on the outside to help coordinate the final phase. Someone he trusts. This is it, Zara said, turning to face Kale fully. This is our chance to clear your mother's name and bring down the people who destroyed so many lives. Looking into her amber eyes, Cale saw his own determination reflected there, but also something deeper, a partnership forged in shared purpose and growing affection. Over the past weeks, he'd fallen for her brilliant mind, her fearless spirit, and the way she made him believe that impossible dreams could become reality. Together, he asked softly. Together, she confirmed, and when she leaned forward to kiss him, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Their lips met in the soft glow of the holographic displays, a moment of perfect connection amid the chaos of conspiracy and rebellion. When they finally parted, Cale felt as though something fundamental had shifted in his understanding of what was possible. "Well," Juno said dryly, "I suppose that settles the partnership question." But even as they began planning their assault on Station Nexus, none of them noticed the barely perceptible tremor in the ship's hull, the signature of a cloaked surveillance drone that had been tracking them through the nebula. In her office, aboard the Tribunal's flagship, Supreme Arbiter Nyx Valdris studied the transmitted footage with cold satisfaction. Her silver patterns pulsed with anticipation as she watched the rebels plan their doomed mission. "Prepare a reception committee," she instructed her aide, "and send a message to Tartarus 7. Tell them to prepare Dr. Ashworth for transport. She's about to become very useful bait." The trap was set, the players in motion, and love itself was about to be tested by the cruelest forces in the galaxy. Station Nexus hung in space like a mechanical constellation, its crystalline spires and rotating habrings generating their own aurora in the void. From the observation deck of a stolen maintenance vessel, Cale watched Tribunal patrol ships move in perfect formations around the station's perimeter, a deadly dance of authority and power that had once seemed unbreachable. "Remember," Admiral Orion Blake's voice crackled through their encrypted calm channel, "you have exactly 18 minutes from the moment Zara begins her infiltration. After that, the security grid will adapt to her modifications and lock down completely." Cale glanced at Zara, who was making final adjustments to her portable hacking array. She'd spent the past 48 hours creating a device that could theoretically slice through the Tribunal's quantum encryption. But theory and practice were two very different things. In the unforgiving realm of galactic espionage, 18 minutes to change the galaxy, she murmured, checking her equipment one final time. No pressure at all. Despite the gravity of their situation, Cale found himself smiling. Even facing impossible odds, Zara maintained the quick wit and fearless spirit that had captured his heart. "You know," he said softly, "when this is over, I'd like to take you somewhere with real sunsets, maybe one of the garden worlds in the Andromeda sector." Zara's amber eyes met his, warm with affection and something deeper. "Is that a promise, pilot?" "It's a vow," he replied, and meant every word. They sealed their helmets and prepared for insertion. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Zara would access the communication hub through a maintenance shaft while Cale provided distraction by initiating a false emergency in the station's docking bay. Orion would coordinate from within, feeding them real-time intelligence and creating windows of opportunity. But as they approached the station's outer hull, Cale felt the familiar chill of intuition that had kept him alive through 17 years of dangerous flying. Something was wrong. The patrol patterns were too perfect, the security responses too coordinated. "Zara," he started to say, but she was already moving, her slender form disappearing into the maintenance access with practiced efficiency. The next 15 minutes passed. In a blur of controlled chaos, Cale triggered emergency protocols throughout the docking section, sending security teams scrambling to respond to fabricated hull breaches and environmental failures. His wrist display showed Zara's progress as she navigated the station's mechanical arteries, each passing minute bringing them closer to either triumph or disaster. "I'm in," Zara's voice whispered through his earpiece. "Beginning data transfer now." On his screen, Cale watched as terabytes of classified information began flowing through rebel networks across the galaxy. Juno's evidence, 17 years of compiled proof, spreading like wildfire through news channels and underground communication grids. The truth about the Tribunal's crimes was finally being revealed. Then everything went wrong. Kale. Zara's voice cracked with panic. It's a trap. They're jamming my extraction route. The communication cut to static. Through the observation portal, Kale watched in horror as security forces surrounded the communication hub. Energy barriers flickered to life, sealing off every escape route. Orion. Kale shouted into his comm. They have Zara. I know, son. The Admiral's voice was heavy with regret. They've had us under surveillance since the nebula. But the data transfer is complete. The truth is out there now. Zara succeeded. Success felt like ashes in Kel's mouth as he watched tribunal soldiers escorting a bound figure away from the hub. He'd found love among the stars, and now it was being torn away from him, just as his mother had been 17 years ago. Where are they taking her? He demanded. A pause, then, the detention level. But Kale, there's something else. They're bringing prisoners up from Tartarus 7. Your mother, she's here. The words hit him like a hyperdrive malfunction, overwhelming and impossible to process. His mother, alive, on this very station while the woman he loved was being dragged away to face interrogation. And worse, I'm coming aboard, Kale said, his voice deadly calm. Son, you can't. Watch me. What followed was less a rescue mission than controlled insanity. Kale used every trick he'd learned in 17 years of flying to dock with the station undetected, then fought his way through security checkpoints with the desperate fury of a man who had everything to lose. The stolen security codes Orion provided opened some doors. His pulse blaster and sheer determination handled the rest. He found them in the detention level's highest security section, a sterile corridor, lined with energy barriers that hummed with lethal potential. Through the first barrier, he saw Zara suspended in a neural interrogation device, her face pale but defiant as tribunal technicians prepared their equipment. Through the second barrier, he saw a woman who had haunted his dreams for 17 years. Mira Ashworth had aged beyond her years. Her once vibrant auburn hair was now streaked with white, and the soft curves of the scientist he remembered had been sharpened by hardship into angular determination. But her green eyes identical to his own blazed with undiminished intelligence. Hello, my little star, she said softly, and despite everything, Kale felt 8 years old again. Mama. The word came out cracked, carrying 17 years of loss and longing. Working frantically, he overloaded the barrier controls with techniques Zara had taught him during their journey. The energy fields collapsed with sparks and the acrid smell of burned circuitry. Mira stepped out of her cell and immediately pulled him into an embrace that felt like coming home after a lifetime in exile. You grew up, she whispered against his shoulder. You became exactly the man I knew you would be. We have to get Zara, Kale said, pulling back to meet her eyes. She's the woman I love, and she risked everything to prove your innocence. Mira's expression shifted, becoming something harder and more dangerous. Then we save her. But first, you need to understand what we're really fighting. As they moved toward Zara's cell, Mira spoke quickly, her voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. The bioweapons they blamed me for creating, I discovered who really made them. It wasn't terrorists, Kale. It was Nyx Valdres herself, the Supreme Arbiter. Kel's hands froze on the barrier controls. She's been using my research, combining it with Zephyrian biotechnology, to create weapons that can target specific genetic markers. She can design plagues that will kill only humans, or only Centaurians, or any species she chooses. The tribunal isn't just corrupt, it's preparing for genocide. The barrier around Zara's cell collapsed, and Kale caught her as she stumbled free from the interrogation device. Her amber eyes were unfocused but aware, and when she saw him, her face lit up with relief and love. You came for me, she whispered. Always, he replied, helping her steady herself against his shoulder. How touching, a familiar harmonic voice said from behind them. They turned to see Nyx Valdres entering the detention level, flanked by a figure. Kale didn't recognize a pale, sharp-featured human woman whose cold smile reminded him uncomfortably of a predator studying prey. Dr. Ravencross, Mira said, her voice filled with disgust. My former research partner, the one who stole my work and twisted it into weapons. Raven's smile widened. Stole is such an ugly word, Mira. I prefer to think of it as evolution. Your quaint notions about healing plants were holding back true progress. Progress toward what? Zara demanded, though her voice was still weak from the interrogation. Toward a galaxy where order prevails, Nyx replied, her silver patterns pulsing with satisfaction. Where species remain properly separated. Where chaos is eliminated through careful biological control. Humans have proven too chaotic, too unpredictable. It's time for more disciplined minds to guide galactic civilization. You're insane, Kale said flatly. I'm practical. Nyx gestured, and security barriers began descending around them. And unfortunately for you, your little data broadcast has only accelerated our timeline. Within 72 hours, every human world in the galaxy will experience simultaneous terrorist attacks. Using Dr. Ashworth's botanical research, the surviving populations will be so grateful for tribunal protection that they'll welcome any solution we offer. But even as the barriers closed around them, Kale felt no despair. Zara's hand found his, warm and strong despite her ordeal. His mother stood beside him, alive and unbroken after 17 years of imprisonment. And across the galaxy, the truth was spreading through networks that no amount of tribunal power could completely suppress. You made one mistake, Mira said, calmly, facing her captors without fear. And what's that? Nyx demanded. You underestimated love. Mira replied, looking at her son and the woman who had won his heart. It makes people do impossible things, as if summoned by her words. Explosions echoed through the station's hull, through the detention level's viewports. They could see ships dropping out of hyperspace rebel vessels, merchant fleets, even some tribunal ships whose crews had apparently decided which side of justice they wanted to serve. Admiral Orion Blake's voice crackled through the station's communication system. This is Admiral Blake to all tribunal personnel. The crimes of the current administration have been exposed. Stand down and surrender, or be treated as accessories to genocide. The galaxy had heard the truth, and it was choosing to fight back.